Hi Nandan.
Hi, Chetan.
So many thanks for coming in today. Viewers, just to let you know, Nandan and I are old friends, classmates. We've been friends for now, 30 years
I think so.
plus. Yeah. Nandan is a very accomplished lawyer, sportsman. He's a presidential awardee from India. He was also under 19 cricket captain and a lot more things as well. He was a topper at law school. I remember how many places did you go to? Oxford, Harvard, all of those things as well. And he runs his famous law firm dedicated towards sports law, amongst other things as well. He counts who's who in sports as his clientele. I'm very privileged to have him here. Many thanks, Nandan,
Thank you
for all of these things, right? So, and one of the things why I invited Nandan was also, you remember Nandan back in law school, correct?
Yeah.
You were quite interested in technology. You even wrote a book, and we did so we did all of those things, and I was part of the technology law committee. Basically the tech law committee had like one computer in law school and things like that. But anyway, it's come a long way from that, right? And now we are in the age of AI, and you've seen all of these things also, and you've had an active interest in both in technology and sports. So how have you seen the last 20 years evolve, correct, from the time that we were law students to where it is now, and in practice in business? How have you seen technology actually evolve?
Yeah. First of all, I think thank you, Chetan, for having me here. It's lovely to reconnect, and we've had so many adventures together. And I think when we were in law school, it was the early stages of even the internet in India. Forget about advanced technologies. And I think the thing that connected us was that almost the mystery of the unknown, of not knowing where this is going to go, but being very excited about its potential and how it's going to change the arc of our lives. And I think this 30 years later, we are again at that same point with a great unknown, perhaps AI being the driver among other things. So there's an element of excitement, but also an element of trepidation, because in some sense we have lived our life on certain principles, and we've embedded certain ways of doing things over the last 30 years, which were the adventures of that time. So some one arc is finished, and at this stage in our life to be challenged again, it requires, I think, a level of more humility to begin again in some ways. So I think it's a very interesting phase of our lives, phase not just personally but also as a society. When you ask about the trends that have happened, a tremendous amount of globalization of business, of way of practicing, the movement of people. And when we were at that point of time, actually the internet was the outlet to those experiences.
Yeah.
And in some sense, the early potential of what tech gave us, this window into the world, then became a port, right? Because we went through that window and went out and had these different experiences. So I think we're very fortunate when we did our legal education. I know that you were equally lawyer, but also hugely interested in technology. And very interesting to see the arc that you have also traveled.
Correct. I think my interest from law school, so it was more towards like technology, and also my career took on a path. You're the guy who went to California, but I was the guy who worked, with some of the firms there. Just to let you know, Nandan worked with DPW in California, and I ended up in my career in different companies there as well. So I think some of those Silicon Valley vibes, early vibes, were something that we were exposed to, and that really helped us in our journey through technology as well. But having said that, now just a detour to sports law, where you've been quite active as well. And there's been a lot of technology in play. If you look at any of the latest broadcasts in sport, especially on cricket, the amount of technology that's at play is immense, right? Right from like the videos that go over the stadium and things like that, to ball tracking technology and so on, correct? This did not exist when you were playing, correct? So, and even then, how have you seen that in the practice of law in sport, correct? I mean, have you seen technology come and take a ringside view when you practice sports law? So
Yeah, so first I'll try and sort of connect a couple of other dots, Chetan, which is a lot of people think I moved from technology law to sports law. In fact, the principles and things that are of interest to me are very similar in both. In particular, the development of global law in these subjects, right? With the internet, the thing that it really challenged was the issue of jurisdiction, of where does one law begin and one the other end. And we've seen how that has really challenged the way law is not just practiced, but how countries regulate the internet. So there was this concept of an autonomous regulation of the internet, where there would be, in some sense, governors which are transnational but supranational governors. In fact, that very principle applies in sports as well, where you have private bodies, national and international sports federations, setting rules and context for the whole world at the same time. So, sport is again quite unique. It breaks the boundaries from a utilitarian perspective. The internet broke it from a I would say, a feature perspective. There was no physical boundary. But in sport, it's actually a principle, because if you want to build sport as a global product, which it is a global product, you want to have a world championship, you want to have a World Cup, you have to play by the same rules wherever you're playing. So someone in Brazil, someone in India, someone in Australia, someone in Sweden, when they're playing football, they're playing in the same size ground with the same weight football, with the same rules, and the referee is expected to apply the same principles. So when a club match is going on in any of these places, they're all sort of leading into state teams to national teams to for potentially playing the FIFA World Cup, right? So globally, they're all part of the same competition, which makes it a real interesting challenge for sports law to try and find principles that you can apply everywhere in the world. So again, you're trying to bring global rules onto local systems. And I think that is the sort of similarity between the law of the internet and the law of sport. But coming to where your question is on the role technology plays, I think technology plays a very important disrupting role, but because it asks very difficult questions of the legal structures. And my belief is that sport is the playground, really, literally, where a lot of innovative new things come first. They get tested. It's like a little bit of a sandbox. And when a balance is found between utility, regulation, and sort of long-term sustainability, then we start transporting it into other areas of our public and private lives. So I think that role of technology as disruptor, but also as experimental opportunities within sport are something we're seeing a lot of.
And in fact, I think, you recently written a fantastic book, Boundary Lab, which deals with some of these issues as well, correct? So in Boundary Lab, you've dealt with, for instance, legal issues in sports.
Yes.
You've also gone into issues such as integrity, so and also how individual rights have sort of like shaped sports law as well, correct? And this is an opportunity to talk to viewers about your book as well, But my question is going to be more generic. In what ways do you think that legal tech can really shape sports law as well? As an example, you've been exposed to quite a few things on legal tech. You've discussed a few things on how technology has generally sort of influenced sports law in Boundary Lab. But generally, if you look at how Gen AI has come over the last couple of months, it's actually been there for some time in development. First it was NLP, then it became machine learning, then it took on to large language models, and then you now have an age where it can actually really think for itself. Now, this has wide repercussions across different sectors.
Absolutely.
And I recently saw an ad from a construction company which was actually building a building, saying, "Hey, ChatGPT, try doing this," correct? Is this something similar in sports law, saying, "Hey, ChatGPT," or whatever they call it, can you actually influence sports and sports law? What do you think about how legal tech is disrupting
Yeah, so
all
we've
these things.
already seen some of that, and you talked about integrity, but I'll just do a little bit of a breakup of
Sure.
what sports law might generally contain, right? So you'll see, at the risk of oversimplification, four aspects of sports law. One would be sports governance, which is how the bodies that govern sport regulate themselves, organize themselves. So effectively, these are private bodies playing a public function. So they have elections, that election puts in place a managing committee, you have a general body, and that general body and managing committee relate to each other in applying the rules of sport. So you have sports governance, you have sports regulation, which will be what the sports governing body is doing with all of its stakeholders. So, for example, with other bodies, with competitors, with superior bodies like the international federation that it works with its state units, with other bodies, but also with all the participants. And there, things like integrity are very, very critical to the sports regulatory landscape. So you have anti-doping, you have anti-match fixing. So you are actually tracking how a competition goes. The third aspect is sports transactions. So sports is also an industry where there's a lot of commerce going on, and a fair bit of transactional work goes on with setting up a franchise system. So you have franchise agreements. An athlete might work on endorsing a product, so you have endorsement agreements. There's broadcasting, sponsorship. There's a lot of transactional work which goes on, which has a sporting hue. It's not like these contracts don't occur outside the sporting world. All of them have their the analogs, right? You'll have a celebrity endorsement agreement in Bollywood as much as you would have in sport, but you have to understand the uniqueness of a sporting system. So I would say transactional law with a sensitivity to sport. And I think the fourth one is disputes. So sports disputes, and that sort of completes a four-level set within sports law. We've already seen, and there's very significant experiments going on of the role of AI in the integrity aspects of sport. Right. So actually, a whole study is going on right now on using AI in anti-doping. So what we have today is biological passports of athletes. So that you get a imprint of what a person's DNA structure looks like. Just from blood reports, you can get a lot of data now. Right. And you keep comparing that over time. And now AI is being used to spot patterns in changes in the ways that laboratory tests and just a sort of a textual report is limited
to do all of these things.
The other one that is being using this actively is to look at manipulation of matches. So is the sort of the tempo of play, the way people are competing, are they really giving their best? So looking at a model of how certain matches have gone in the past and how a particular match is going, also relating it to betting data. So looking at multiple different data sets to try and see if there's unusual patterns in play, and those unusual patterns in play relate to unusual betting patterns to try and understand match fixing. Now, I mean, I think all of this is going to come also to sports disputes, sports transactions, and automating. So to me, the very interesting one is what is the future role in sports governance? So right now, it's a very representative model of sports governance where effectively you have to elect someone to be leaders in these bodies. So does this and tech provide a potential for DAOs? So can fans eventually own the teams? Can the public participate in the way sport is not just organized, but also govern the rules that apply? So it's essentially moving from a virtual world where you're used to playing fantasy sports, video games, and the fan is moving more and more closer to saying, I want to have a say in what's happening on the ground as well. And I think tech is going to play an interesting role there.
No, it does. It actually, that's an interesting point as well. I think a couple of years back, there was a crowd-funded project for a fantasy gaming team. In fact, invested in that team. And what happened was, first of all, there's no time to monitor all of these things and so on as you go on. But it's very interestingly, the kind of, you get to have a say in what kind of games that they participate in, where they should be coming and all of these things. It's very interesting that it actually took the crowd-funded route to do all of these things as well. But there are a couple of other things that are interesting, like, like when I was showing you some of Coco's products as well, in terms of that technology is already there today. As an example, you could upload advertisements or YouTube videos or any, and then make a fairly accurate analysis, whether it is going to be misleading and or it's violating an endorsement and things like this. That kind of technology is already shaping up.
Yes.
Earlier, it used to be a very manual process, and then you'd have to go. Still, you have the core systems that are not fully aligned to all of these things, but I think at least in India now, and as well as in various parts of the world, the amendments to the evidence legislation, especially in common law countries, is becoming very critical for the acceptance of electronic records. And AI, when it generates reports or records, is an example of an electronic record as well. So that can actually be placed, for evidence. And one of the things that we also, since we do a lot of work in the AI field, is there are two things that you always that it always occurs to me. If you use raw systems in AI without fine tuning, without putting in guardrails, without orchestration, things like these,
Yes.
what's going to happen is it'll hallucinate, right? And that tends to happen even with the best of the systems. And you need so if you use that with actual data, for instance, you mentioned large data sets and the ability for AI to sort of like crumple all of these things and make sense out of this. So unless you have some very fine-tuned systems, you will end up with some nonsensical data.
Absolutely.
Correct. And this is a very hard problem to solve. It sometimes is not able, you are not able to overcome this. Having said that, if you use proper engineering techniques and things like that, you can get almost 100% analysis. I can, for instance, I can confidently look, being a lawyer and having built some of these products, correct? If you take a lawyer or if you give an experienced lawyer, let's say a 100-page contract, that person, is just going to skim through it. Not for anything else. It's just a lot of habit. You don't need to look at everything else. But still, you always think, okay, and then you have associates, maybe if you're working in a law firm, to be able to look at it. Or, if you're working in a company, one of the things that really comes up is you don't have enough time to do a detailed analysis. So you send a contract out to a law firm for review and things like that. Even there are different, depending on, I don't know, this is my hypothesis. I feel that, depending on the seniority of a lawyer, the tendency to skim becomes much, it advances with the experience. But with AI, what happens is it goes through line by line, word by word, paragraph by paragraph, and you get an accurate analysis in that manner. Correct. And that has been quite an eye opener as well. Correct. And I say this because in practice, especially in legal practice, this happens quite a bit in terms of depending on the workload, depending on other things, you tend to not sort of like have the ability to go through everything at once or to take a nuanced view. This is where it can really help. Correct. Now, these are a few things which we've seen in sports law, for that matter. Correct. One of the things which also occurs to me is infringement, especially. It keeps coming up very frequently. And if you try and do this, do a manual search, you have to go through places like Instagram, to all the social media, to all through trademark journals and things like that. But with the right amount of, say, machine learning and the ability to go through all of these things, orchestrations, you can immediately be able to sort of like, at least on a real-time basis, depending on a client's requirements, be able to spot all of these things as well. Correct. Manual. And sometimes it could also be a combination of some of these things. For instance, there may be an infringement in the form of a competitor using the similar colors, which may not be very evident to a human reviewing this, but something which a trained ML model is able to spot. We've seen some of these things as well. So that's where things are heading. And I think, if you really look at all of these technologies which are evolving and or have evolved to an extent where it can really assist, say, in say day-to-day practice and things like that. It's going to be really helpful. But what do you think?
Yeah, no, I think in sport in particular, Chetan, I think there's a high chance for more effective, efficient running organizations. And why do I say that? It's because these are intrinsically multi-stakeholder environments.
Yeah.
You're dealing with multiple different interests at the same time. And I'll just place, for example, let's say BCCI. A BCCI isn't in any single unidirectional or bidirectional relationship. Every one of its relationships has multiple different factors played in. So it contracts with the players. It also contracts with the broadcaster. It has sponsors. The players have their own sponsors. The players play for some of the franchises which are set up by the BCCI. There's the BCCI has to deal with the ICC. BCCI has to deal with all of the other cricket boards in the world. So there's no piece that moves and without other implications, right? So the BCCI chooses to, today they have, let's say, 60-day IPL. They make it 120 days. A lot of everything moves as a consequence, right? The players are unavailable to other tournaments. The ICC has to give permission. The players might have more injury risk. So a lot of different things have to be factored in. And in that realm, so from the senior most to the junior most, how does tech enable better decision making? Understanding when you press one button, what are the other things that in some sense get affected, but also on a day-to-day basis, dealing with risk, brand risk, commercial risk, integrity risk. I think is a very significant and probably the first foray that tech and AI is going to make in sports organizations, because any foray also has risks.
Yeah.
And to understand the cost benefit analysis of any new foray, it might be a new way of advertising. But when you advertise, have you got all the licenses from the players, from the team, from BCCI? Does it match with BCCI's sort of sponsor guidelines? But also, are you violating Indian law, celebrity sort of endorsement guidelines? So there's multiple different things going on. But the decision is being made by some social media manager down the line.
Exactly.
Right? So how do you enable that social media manager who's going to put the next post on Instagram to be empowered to know, okay, checkbox, we have this license from the player, he's still on contract with the BCCI, this does not violate any of the claims that we are making on behalf of some sponsor, the sponsor agreement is still valid, we are not breaching exclusivity in some other. So there's multi-dimensional, which you probably have to go to a law firm and get this checked.
Right.
Power is devolved downwards to people who are undertaking tasks.
That's true. I think even that's not just true of sports law, but even if you look at other large companies, especially in the tech sector, sales is no longer the domain of contracts are no longer the domain of say finance or legal. It's in the domain of sales. It's the sales folks who actually run a contract or things like this, which is also very similar. You have in other countries, as an example, you'll have your own person representing you and things like that. So, but that's how it's evolving as well. That, when you were mentioning the previously, it just set off a train of thought. I was talking to my dad, okay, and saying, look, my friend Nandan is going to be coming for a podcast. He was a cricketer in his time, and it was a lot more simpler. There was only one sponsor, which was a bank that you worked for. Because the banks, at least in India, were the main sponsors. And then there was not much endorsement or some of those things. I think at least until 1983, this was the case, and things like that. And now it's become. You were just speaking, and it just occurred to me, it's so complex, correct? But a lot of these things are also subject to like automation.
Yes.
At the end of the day, correct? So, and the other thing is also confidentiality, correct? Which are two key things. I was reading a post that day by Virat Kohli. Apparently, he went to this bakery in Frasertown, correct? And he was really concerned about using his credit card because people will know who it is, correct? But they were so busy that he just didn't care, but these are two things, right? And it's got impact, and if you use AI and automation, it has a bearing on confidentiality. It has a bearing. And so how do you, as a sports lawyer and as a technologist, right? how do you see being able to manage your clients' expectations in some of these things?
So, I mean, anything new, Chetan, will always challenge, but it'll always have features, it will always have risks. And we're already seeing that, for example, in the endorsement market, player endorsements, same with other celebrities. AI has two things, right? What can it do? It can almost replicate you as if you were there in person. What has been the greatest limitation of our super athletes actually endorsing brands? It's actually physical availability. So they have to go for the shoot. They're so busy, they're playing 200 days in the year, so they have 15, 20 days to shoot. So the portfolio is limited by the number of days for shooting. Now imagine if you open that up to AI and you just essentially effectively shoot one portfolio, which is a common portfolio, which can be Gen AI can work with that portfolio and you pass that on to the brand. So you have access to this virtual set, right? So it's no longer limited by 15, 20 days. What is that potential is to unlock the celebrity in a new way. But the flip side of it is that we've already seen what we would call fake endorsements. There is so much information out there that the people using, for example, Virat Kohli's image to claim that he's endorsing their betting brand without any permission, without any access. So there's also the way that you use public resources to use celebrity endorsements in a fake way. So something like this is going to shape the market in both potential as well as risk. So how do you, in some sense, buffer the risks while recognizing the potential and really unlocking? I think you have to make the person comfortable if they see it only as from the perspective of fear of someone will use my name in the wrong place. It is sort of a mislabeling of AI's potential.
Okay. But that's an interesting point that you brought up as well. While, for instance, you can clone someone's face, and with today's technology, it's very easy to sort of like even clone voice and put the two together and things like that, which we term as deep fake. But it's actually the flip side of the coin, correct? You think about it in your circumstance. Players are so struggling for time that they have to use technology to be available for, and there are different price points whether you want a live video, short, whatever the case is, right? So, but the flip side of that is deepfakes, correct? So, and also one thing I looked into this, right? And when I was talking to your dad about this, he said earlier, you had in his times, the average life of a sports person was probably less than a decade, right? Think about it. Now, with the advent of the latest technologies, and you can also measure how, if you go through IPL statistics, it's ridiculous, right? It's pretty much scary that they can even predict, and using predictive analytics to be able to say how a person is going to be able to perform or not. Do you think that, for an average sportsman, or sportswoman, the span of their career has actually increased because of AI, or has it decreased?
I don't know if AI, but certainly science. If you look at it as a much wider term, just the use of analytics and testing and other things like that certainly has improved injury management. There's actually ways to even predict that someone is likely to get an injury. So until now, person is to get injured and then you try and treat them. There's even now AI tech which says that once you take the blood markers and other markers, you can even predict if someone is likely to have a hamstring injury. And that's already in the NFL. So there's an app just for likelihood of hamstring injury. Because hamstring injury, this could be a 2 million, 5 million player, would knock the person out for the whole season, right? So there's a single app for hamstring injury predictive analysis. It's not even waiting for the event to occur. So, you can get very granular, very detailed the minute there's meaning to it, right? If there's commercial value, someone will build that product. So certainly athlete care has gone up. Another aspect which perhaps has opportunities, athlete well-being. So using AI for mental health and sort of responsive care, which in some sense athletes at the end of the day have to also be very selfish and care about themselves even in a team environment. So it makes it very challenging to talk to teammates, to share your challenges, particularly in hyper-competitive environments. In many cases, your teammate is hoping to replace you in the team as well. And only so much sports psychology and all will work. So can we build responsive ways to actually deal with failure, with even mental health challenges, anxiety, and that I think is the sort of in a very customized way at the very top of the game. If we can figure that out, imagine devolving that down to common population, because we look to our athletes for inspiration, but ambassadorship.
Absolutely.
And if they are susceptible and admit to being susceptible to mental health issues and find solutions, I think that ambassadorship role can play in many more dimensions and not just physical prowess and achievement.
No, I think that's a super topic as well. Correct. That has really, and there are many applications now, to be able to sort of like deal with this in different ways.
And just I'll take a minute there why I brought this up. It sounds like a non-legal issue, but this is actually all duty of care.
It is.
So
it is.
Governance, duty of care. You may think that this is all athlete support, right? But keeping someone healthy, keeping someone injury free, and dealing with the stresses of life is also part of duty of care of a sports body and sports team, very directly in the crosshairs of sports law, I would say.
Absolutely. I mean, if you went through RCB's latest season, correct, you would go through like 6
Ups and
wins,
downs,
and it would be like, emotionally you'd be like drained after whatever it is. But I think that's a very important point. In fact, we did a bot some time back. It was nothing connected to this, and you could have a conversation with it, correct? And the idea was that there are so many life experiences that each one of us has, correct, that you want to be able to sort of like train something or just tell people that this is the way. This is a little futuristic looking, like say, as you'd see in the movies, that you'd actually have a discussion with an AI. This is exactly what happened. We built voice features into it, and that you could actually have a conversation. And the way that, and we deployed it to a small team to see how each one would typically use something like this. I was one of those people as well to actually test it out. And it quickly became a place where you could just have a conversation which you could not have with anyone else. Okay. And and typically in real life, you would have family dealing with this. Maybe a spouse or your significant other would deal with something like on something like this. But one of the ways of AI that it scarily supports you, with the right amount of stuff. And you're speaking to a virtual person. And the best part about one of the things about AI, which also comes is, and you can train it the way it is, but by default, if you've managed it well, you can make it almost balanced without having to take sides. Correct. So
I read something very interesting the other day on how people are trying to leave a legacy for their own children.
Yeah.
So I think one of the things we miss most often when a parent is gone is the ability to have a conversation, take advice, and stuff like that. So people are actually now building parental avatars that are customized to the particular parent. And trying to feed as much during their lifetime. Earlier you would just leave some letters of advice and stuff. So imagine continuing to be able to interact with the values, the ethics, the principles by which your parents want you to live while they're no longer there. So I think incredible what the future is going to look like, and creating more and more safe spaces. But coming back to sport, the opportunity and the challenge is to still keep sport human, and the element of humanity is also uncertainty. Why are we attracted with sport? If we already knew the results, we wouldn't be so attracted, right? So, technology, AI, and other things are going to have a role, but we might be happy to also limit it to a place where it doesn't impinge on the values of humanity and uncertainty being intrinsic elements of sport. If you take them to an extreme, then sport doesn't matter anymore, right?
So, yeah. No, but I think on the contrary, I believe that sports is all the more important in the age of AI.
Yes.
Otherwise, it's very easy to get into the age of AI and lose yourself.
Correct.
Previously, there were games and virtual avatars and so many other things. But actually, playing sport has different connotations. I don't need to get into
and reminds you that you're human.
That you're human at the end of the day, correct? At least gets you a chance to speak to other people, be in a team environment, go through all of those things as well. And it's something to be enjoyed as well. But you've written extensively on this subject in your latest book as well, and I urge people to sort of like read it. And there are many interesting things as well. I learned a lot about some of the sports cases, right? Which is mentioned. Don't miss some of those things as well. But what advice would you give, Nandan? Look, you've been in the profession for a long time. You've straddled different things. You also manage a foundation, for players and things like that. What would be your advice to legal professions who are looking at sports law, but in the age of AI, correct? How does AI sort of like, how would you typically look at a lawyer who's coming of age in this era where you have AI document reviews, AI contract generation, AI documentation, you could even speak to it. It can do quite a few things for you, correct? So I know it's a difficult.
Yeah, I can't say I have all the advice. If I did, I would be implementing it. But what I do believe is, and I've tried to practice it in my life also, is to not get labeled as either lawyer and only a lawyer, or a sports lawyer and a sports lawyer. So I think these are all labels other people use. Yeah. So I think limiting labels in your own mind is a very effective way of making sure that you see the whole field and not feel challenged that what's the challenge to sports law. If a challenge comes to sports law, we'll find some other interesting thing to do, because in my mind, I'm not a sports lawyer, or I'm not limited to being a lawyer. I might find something to do which harnesses the technology. So I think when we bucket ourselves in a particular box, or we put ourselves in a box, we see challenges more than we see the opportunities. So I would say, if you are willing to not self-label, the first thing you'll see is the opportunity rather than the risk. Because it's natural to feel the risk the minute you say, okay, what is the risk of AI to lawyers? So I'm thinking of, okay, someone's going to take away my work, my business, and my future. But on the other hand, if you see it as, I'm going to engage with the world without any labels. Let's see what technology is going to do for me, and allow me to do even more interesting things, open up my world, meet new people, open up the scale of what I'm doing. Maybe I'm doing it in only Bangalore now, and do it all India, all Asia, all the whole world. So you might just change your playgrounds.
Absolutely. I think that's this allows you to actually expand beyond your local territory or local place wherever you are, especially on that. But that reminds me, many years back, when we went and asked for sponsorships, when we were in this technology committee, for a journal that we had just brought about, it's called some Journal of Law and Technology. People were like, "This law and technology? What does that even mean?"
Now it's a well-established journal which people want to write in. So you can feel quite proud about that.
And the question, we went to a major company at that time, and they said, "Technology, will you draft contracts for me? Is that what you can do?" You evolved so much after that, correct? And I did spend some time on that book that was written in 2000. I still have that copy, right? Saying how much of that actually came true, how much of that didn't, correct? So I think that's something which is, but a lot of it actually, is evolved in different ways. Yeah. So I think that's where things are. But pleasure having you, Nandan, on all of these things as well.
Lovely to have a chat.
Same here.
Good luck at Coco and everything that lies ahead too.
Same with you as well. And we've covered quite a few topics, correct? It's just a free-flowing conversation. But many thanks. I've learned a lot from this conversation as well. So thanks so much.
Pleasure. Thank you, Chitta.
Thanks, man.